wind screamed past her ears, tearing at her cloak as Romi Jade fell. Her vision blurred with tears from the rushing air, the city below a chaotic blur of lights, smoke, and ruin. She was weightless, tumbling through Coruscant's endless abyss, every second stretching into eternity. She hit something, a durasteel beam jutting out from the broken skyline. Her side collided with it, hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs, but it slowed her descent. Her cloak snagged on another jagged edge, jerking her body to a near halt with a sickening wrench. For a brief moment, she dangled, suspended above the maelstrom, before the fabric tore. She fell again, spinning, crashing through a hanging mesh of construction scaffolding that broke her speed but left her body battered and bleeding. Finally, she struck the ground. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through her, the fractured duracrete cracking further beneath her broken form. She lay still, barely breathing, blood seeped from a deep gash on her temple, pooling beneath her. And yet, she was alive. Barely. Somewhere in the fog of pain and fading consciousness, the Force whispered to her. Not in words, but in sensation, a flicker of warmth in the icy void. It flowed through her, fragile yet persistent, knitting the frayed edges of her life force together just enough to keep the light from extinguishing entirely. Her heart stuttered, each beat a monumental effort. Romi clung to the thread of life, her will unyielding even as her body threatened to fail her. In her fractured mind, she saw flashes of memory, the tranquil halls of the Jedi Temple, the serene hum of meditation, the faces of those she had sworn to protect. And Halcyon, Sinestra now, her once promising apprentice. Romi's lips moved, but no sound came. Halcyon, I forgive you. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, taking in the devastation around her. Smoke and ash blanketed the air, distant explosions echoing through the ruined cityscape. The massive Star Destroyer loomed above like a grim specter, casting its shadow over the crumbled Senate building. Her body refused to move. Every breath was agony, shallow and rasping. The world grew dimmer, the edges of her vision darkening. Romi Jade lay motionless in the rubble. Blood stained the ground beneath her, her once vivid presence in the Force reduced to a faint, imperceptible flicker. To any onlooker who may stumble upon her, she was gone, another casualty of the chaos engulfing Coruscant. But beneath the surface, her body made a desperate choice. The Force, still faintly intertwined with her will to survive, triggered an ancient instinct buried deep within her Jedi training. Romi's breathing slowed to a near standstill, her heart barely beating. Her body forced her into a hibernation trance, a technique she had mastered long ago, but had never expected to need. Her metabolism plummeted, consuming only a fraction of the oxygen a living being would require. To all outward appearances, she was dead. Even the faintest life scanners would register little more than an echo, and only the most trained of ears, listening intently with a stethoscope, might detect the whisper of her heart. The trance was a fragile state, a delicate tether between life and death. It was not a choice she consciously made, but an act of survival, a final defiance against the inevitability of her end. The minutes stretched endlessly, the chaos of the invasion raging on. Her body remained limp, her aura in the Force dim as an extinguished candle. Even seasoned Jedi would struggle to sense the faint glimmer of her presence. To them, it would have appeared she was truly gone. And so she lay, forgotten amid the destruction, her broken form buried beneath dust and debris. Thurion Heavenshield moved through the wreckage, his senses stretched to their limit. He had felt Romi's presence during the battle, her light blazing as it always had. But now, there was nothing, or almost nothing. He stopped suddenly, his sharp instincts catching the faintest tug in the Force, a trace, a whisper. It was so weak he almost doubted himself, but the Force had guided him here, to this exact spot. Thurion knelt, brushing debris aside with care. As he uncovered her, the sight of her broken body drove the air from his lungs. He pressed his fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse, but finding none. His heart clenched with grief, the thought of her loss unbearable. He cradled her near his chest, and then, finally, he found it. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A spark, hidden deep within her, fighting to stay alive. The hibernation trance had shielded her from death, slowing her body to the brink of stillness. But he could feel the truth. Romi Jade was alive, barely. He worked quickly, lifting her with infinite care, cradling her shattered frame as though she were the most fragile of glass. He could feel her faint heartbeat beneath his fingers, slower than he had ever known possible, but steady. The Force had not abandoned her, and as the lion carried her from the ruins, he vowed she would not face the darkness alone. Romi Jade's light, though faint, had not gone out. Not yet.